Hey everyone, it's Aisha. I would like to give a special thanks to Pat Fergie because he's the one who is behind this. He's the teacher that supports us to tell you about the Renaissance era and some part of the interesting history that has a massive deal behind it. We have a big influence through our life from the era that begins from one century to another one. The timeline from the era was a massive deal for all of us here because everything that we saw today, books, poets, sculptors, buildings, designs, even this kind of clothing, they're all begins with the story that has something to do with one of the characters that has a strong influence in them when it was the Renaissance era. I am inspired by so many artworks, so many interesting and impressive artworks. That's just impossible for us to do that when it was back in the 14th century, I think, by one of the Michelangelo's artwork. It was my biggest inspiration, and I've been a fan of his artwork for like years. Do you notice the Sistine Chapel, the artwork of Adam's creation, or maybe just to mention David, his most famous sculpture that has a man looking to the right side with the bag that he carries on his back. Even though it really represents the icon of like a man, how a man was built with his abs, his perfectly built form of statue is a human. And I think that really influenced through other artists that lived through that day. We have so many sculpture, Roman sculptures and like Greek god sculpture that has a head on it, just like Aphrodite, their own sculpture. They all are inspired by the influence from their innovators, and that's Michelangelo, who is the guy that I'm going to drag into the spotlight today. I have the replica from it. Luckily, I have bought it for months ago when we were still in quarantine and I was bored on like to pick up some furniture, and I was just thinking, why don't I just bought this perfect replica from Michelangelo's artwork. We have the hot pink color featuring into this hat's statue. I don't really want to have the original one in white color, or maybe you can just say it as a pale kind of light gray, because I think it's too boring for us to have so many Roman hats in same color. This artist is pretty smart because he puts red hot pink color just for us to know that this kind of artwork is our kind of aesthetic that we really try to explore in. This is one of the replica from Michelangelo's artwork, and the real statues, like the real artworks from him, are in the Galleria of Arts in Italy, and it was located in Florence, if I was not mistaken. It was in the Accademia Gallery down in Florence in Italy. I have to search that up on Google and it was on my screen. So he put that through. You can see how detailed he is when it comes to like organs, or maybe just to see this replica that really got inspired, that is hugely inspired by Michelangelo's artwork. So we're going to identify this first by the hair of it, the eyes, even though what's most detail about it is like its neck, on like how he even sculpt this part of the neck where the guy is just looking to the right side. I have heard so many fictions about David in the era and like how the statues were built, because David is not a real person, or even the controversy where David is actually Mona Lisa, knowing how Michelangelo is inspired by Da Vinci himself. Da Vinci was also taking a huge part in making creations of like history through timeline to another one. So I think it's a pretty big deal for us to have such a big influence in like Sistine Chapel, or maybe if you know some holy artworks that we call as the Mother Maria holding the body of his son who died from his sacrifice and for his people's sins, or that's what I've heard about. That's also one of his sculpture, and that was called as the Pieta. The Pieta. The Pieta was the Mother Maria holding her son's body in her arms. That's clear, right? He also got the Sistine Chapel, the Last Judgment, the creation of Adam. That has so many powerful meanings behind the paintings. If you guys haven't saw it, please check it out. Please check the Michelangelo list of artworks where Adam and its creation is a very iconic paintings that got featured everywhere. It was just a guy. He was sitting in the shell and he was kind of flying because the backgrounds are pretty unclear, but it definitely describes anything. And he pointed out the finger like this, and it represents the connection between God and human. It was actually pretty iconic, or however do you want to say it, but that's it. And I think Michelangelo has taken a part from it, and the 14th century, he lives through the 14th century to the 15th century, which is a pretty long lifetime, but that's all of his artwork that influences us through like the Roman history and everything. I would like to explain you about more of it, but artworks, paintings, he begins it with, even though we have Raphael, we have the innovator of like the Cubism arts in the museum that's like so famous in France. But I think that's it. The Pat Virgil once reminded me that the Renaissance era was everything that we got in here, and like how do we begin with stories, fashion, style, and everything. Even the least honorable queen on the planet Earth, Marie Antoinette, she creates the fashion of Rococo style with the hair that is so straightened up into the front, and with the gown that is just amazing, with the massive huge part from it, even though she got beheaded because of her luxurious and notorious name and having a life of the party. But I think we should really appreciate those kind of stars from the Renaissance era, and I think that's all what I can describe from True Timeline. And another one, Michelangelo has a pretty great influence, and so is Marie Antoinette. Let's say Da Vinci and any other artist that includes through it. We can just represent it to like colors, poets from Oscar Wilde, poets from Shakespeare. They're all are great, and they have a massive influence in Michelangelo and how he can relate to another one. And I think this kind of magic that really evolves up through, like we have necklace, we have so many fashion styles, preferences, and I think it all begins with the Renaissance era, and that's what creates life and the Renaissance era in between, and we're all interconnected with them. I think that's all of my story that I'm going to tell today. If you would like to know more, if you would like to know what I'm going to ramble about later on, don't forget to hit me up. Thank you, Virgie, for tuning in, for bearing with me for nearly 10 minutes. Now it's the end of my presentations and what I'm going to have in my mind right now. So yeah, see you in the next video if Pat Virgie is going to assign me another one. Bye!